On viewer request, let's talk about the init method and Python's self. This is the only tutorial where I would urge that you follow along from start to finish. This can be thought of as a single example only, where each step follows on from the last. Here we have the most basic of class definitions, with an empty body. The result of this code is to create a class object and assign it a name. The name of this class object is tweet. You can think of it like a factory, providing default behavior and able to create objects in its image, and which does so whenever we execute the class name tweet followed by a pair of brackets. This is known as calling the class. The objects created in this way are known as instance objects. The convention is for instance objects to start with a lowercase character, and for class objects to begin with an uppercase character. Instance objects inherit any class attributes, of which there are none here, and they get their own namespace. That means that if you want to access any attributes of that instance object, for example, message, you can't just write message. You need to write the instance name, a, and then a dot, and then message. That delineates the attributes that belong to the instance A and those that belong elsewhere. We've assigned a string to the instance attribute message, and we access it just in the same way as we assigned to it. So if we now try to print the message attribute in the tweet namespace, we'll get an attribute error, because like we said earlier, it's as if the class object is a factory that provides default behavior, and when we create instance objects, we're getting concrete items that we can change, and any changes that we make are not then propagated back up to the factory. They stay with the instance and die with the instance. We can create as many of these instance objects as we like. So here we've created another instance object and assigned it to B. We assign a different string to b.message and can demonstrate that the two message attributes are different, exist at the same time, and are accessed through their respective namespace. Methods that begin with double underscores and which end in double underscores are special hooks in Python. These methods are also known as Dunder methods, Dunder being short for double underscore. These methods are called automatically at certain times. Classes can override most of these, and will focus on the init method. Whenever we call class objects, the instance object is first created with the Dunder new method, and then any attributes are initialized with the Dunder init method. So the Dunder init method is best known as the initializer method, although most people call it the constructor method. It's called automatically whenever an instance is created. So here we've redefined the tweet class, we've overridden the Dunder init method, and we'll have it print hi. Now when we go to create an instance, we get an error. And despite the fact that we didn't seemingly include any positional arguments when calling tweet, the error is telling us that Dunder init, as we've defined it, takes no positional arguments, but that we provided one. What's going on? If we try to create an instance and we seemingly do include one positional argument, the error says that we've given two. Well, you might have spotted this error, but defining Dunder init without including any parameters is not what you normally see. You would normally see self as the first parameter. When we redefine the class to include self, and we then create an instance, our code works and we see hi. Whenever the class object is called, the instance is always passed as the first argument. But the init method isn't for printing hi to terminal. It's there to perform any initialization and make assignments to instance attributes. Whenever you see the word self in a class definition, self always refers to the particular instance. So now when we come to create our instance, we see that we're missing an argument, the message argument. We've learnt that the instance is passed automatically as the first argument to init whenever we're trying to create an instance, and any other arguments that we pass in here will take up positions 2, 3, 4, etc. Now when we pass in a string when creating an instance, A, it works absolutely fine, and we've printed that attribute here as confirmation. We've created a separate instance of the same class, passed in a different string, and that works fine too. Both of those instances coexist. In the previous class definition, we had the instance attribute a different name to the parameter name, just to highlight the fact that they were different. But what you'll normally see is something along the lines of this second class definition. To reinforce the point, if we don't include self as the first parameter in any method definitions in our class, then those methods will only be available through the class namespace. They won't have access to any instance attributes. And just to clear up how this instance is magically making its way in as the first argument, let's take a look at this. We have instances A and B, which each have their respective message instance attributes as being 1 and 2. So far, so good. There's nothing new here. How about when we try to call the print_tweet method, but in the class objects namespace? When we call this method this way, it tells us that we're missing the self positional argument. Now, we said earlier that self is referring to the instance. Well, we have two instances, A and B. When we pass in A, we get A's message, and when we pass in B, we get B's message. That's what's happening when it looks like we're magically passing in the instance object. I hope that this has cleared up self and the Dunder Init method for you. Leave a comment below letting me know what you thought of this explanation, and if you're on Reddit and you thought this explanation was any good, then I'd be grateful if you could give it an upvote to help give it visibility to others who may benefit from it also.